All right. Um, Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's three prakim Rambam. Hilchos Tumas Oicholin prakim Yud Aleph and Yud Beis. We are starting with the 10th chapter. We're going to be learning more details about the 7 halachic liquids that acquire tuma, that impart tuma, and they also make other food items susceptible to becoming tamei. They are machshir foods to becoming tamei. And this chapter has 17 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. Says that Rambam kfar bi'arnu, we already explained, that's in Perek Aleph. Shehashiva mashkin bolvad, only the 7 liquids, and just to review them, that's water, dew, oil, wine, milk, blood, and honey. They are the ones that shemistamin, that they acquire tuma, they impart tuma, and they make food items susceptible to becoming tamei. V'hasha all other liquids are called in halacha meipedos, fruit juice, and neither do they acquire tuma, nor are they machshir. V'shiva mashkim shemoninu, and these 7 liquids, like we just enumerated them, Toldoy saying they have derivatives. That will be the first topic of this chapter. Kayoytze behen will be governed by the same laws. So let's begin. So the first of the 7 liquids is water, halacha base. So what's a tolda? What's a derivative of water? Hey, these are fluids, hayotzim fluids that secrete from the eye or from the oizen or from the ear, or from the nose, or from the mouth, urine from human beings, being gedolim, whether they are adult beings, being ketanim, whether they are minor human beings. Kol elo hayotzim min ha'adam mashkin hein. They are considered mashkin in the category of mayim. I'm sorry, whether they left the body, they were secreted out of the body consciously, that will be the same. However, in contrast, urine from an animal, and also salt that was liquefied, they have a status of meipedes. And again, as the Rambam says, that loy mistamin v'loy machshirin. Halachi gimel. Hadam hamoni min amashkin, blood. That's one of the 7 liquids. Okay, let's define that. Let's qualify that. Who hadam hashoises, that's blood that flows exclusively. B'shas shchita, during the slaughtering of a behema chaya oifes hatohoidim. Every word is meduyik. In contrast, aval dam hakiluach. Dam hakiluach means blood that flows in the beginning of the shchita. Einoi machshir. Why? Because it's coming from a living being. And it's going to have the same status of blood from a wound. Is blood that is let, which was a very common practice then, which is not machshir. If a person slaughters an animal, the nitats dam and blood splurts on foods, and you go ahead, you will clean the blood in between the slitting of the trachea and the esophagus. Now, what's the issue, guys? If you remember this whole topic of yeshnoi lishchita mitchila va'atsoif, if that would be the case, then even the beginning of the blood, or the blood that came from the beginning of the shchita, will have a din of dam hashoises b'shah shchita. It's going to be machshir. If we're going to say eino l'shchita ela b'soif, and especially because you cleared off the blood, so then that blood is not part of the end. And they say suffix. And therefore, toilen olav sarfin. Gewaldig. Okay. Now, told us ladam, let's give other derivatives of blood, which is again dam hashoisis b'shas shchita, is dam hekesh al adam shhoitzia l'shasiya. Listen to this. If a person had blood, human blood that was released from the body, but not for medicinal purposes, but with the intent of someone drinking that blood, that is told us dam. That's mistamin, and it's machshir. But if you had a normal bloodletting, and v'chein dam shchita, because we mentioned also the dam shchita is from behema chayis v'oifus tohoidim. What's going to happen if it's going to be from behema b'chay v'oifus hatmeim? Similarly, the blood that can leave the body, that is released, with mucus, or sometimes you find blood in the feces, or v'dam hashchin, blood that you find sometimes in boils, vababois, and in blisters. V'tamtzis habasar, blood that's concentrated in the flesh. Kol elu einon mistamin v'loy machshirin. That's considered their fruit juice. Now, one very unique exception, because up until now, we're saying either it's both tamei and machsher, or neither. Here we'll have the exception, that blood from a sheretz, we're speaking about from the 8 shiratzim, they have the status of its flesh, which means it will impart tumah, but it won't be machsher. And the Rambam writes, "Ve'ein lanu kayoytze boy." There's no other liquid at all that is tamei, that imparts tumah, but it's not machsher. Because normally by liquids, it's mimanavshach, either or. Halacha dal. Mei hecholov. Mei hecholov is whey. Whey is that you know when you make cheese, at some point there's the separation of the watery liquid, right, from the solid parts of the meat, of the milk. So we're speaking about the water. Mei cholov has a din of cholov, and cholov is one of the 7 liquids. However, human milk, if there's no need for it, doesn't have a status of liquids, and therefore and for example, what's pshat human milk that there's no need for it? If there is a secretion of milk from a man, there's some sort of hormonal disease. Today in Tavshin Pei Gimel before Mashiach, men are making themselves diseased. So however it came about, so that's something, that milk is not needed. You have milk of an animal or of a chayav, of a non-domesticated animal, that was released without human intent. For example, that either it just flowed out of spontaneously out of the animal, or that a person was touching the animal in that area without intent of milking it, and that stimulated the animal and milk emerged from the animal, that is not considered. It's not considered liquid. However, in contrast, chalefa isha, human milk from a woman, whether it left her body consciously or spontaneously, stomai mashke, it is generally placed in the category of liquid, meaning yes umistame and yes oy machsher. Why is that? Because it's fit to be drunk by an infant, and I don't care if it left her body without intent for that, but it's in the category of liquid. Halacha 5. Bodily fluids that leave people that are impure. Which types of tameim? Like in the case, like we learned by Zav, Anida, and Yoledis, if you remember that Rambam classified the fluids from their body into 9 categories, into 3 groups, and some of them are avatami midoirais. And these liquids, guys, listen to this, mitamin, they impart tumam, beloy hechsher. If they fall on foods, they will render those foods tamei. Normally the rule is first the food has to become wetted. Here it goes together. It makes it wet and it makes it tamei. So don't forget, these liquids are mashkin and they're also tamei. On the level of a nav that imparts the Elohein, and what liquids are we referring to? Body secretions. So zoiv shel zav, the flow of a zav. And once a person became a zav, then is shichva zera. Umei ragwa of his urine, udvias dam and hames, quarter of a loig of blood that left a corpse, the dam hanida, and really it also goes to dam of a zav. Now, chein dam magei fasei shel zav chaveroiv, the blood that flows out of a wound from a zav. And whenever we say zav, the Rambam means zav, anida, and yoledes. The chalav, shalisha, and the milk of a woman, obviously that's a zava, that's a nida, that's what we're talking about. The dimas, enam, and tears from their eyes. Shor told us, here the din is that mitamin, they impart tuma, kamashkin temeim, that what? Shemitamin, beloy kavona, they impart without any special intent. Because shemashkin temeim, Whether they are brought into contact with food, that's what we're talking about, intentionally or not, they impart tumah. And therefore, nida oizava, that if some milk, human milk, flowed out of her body, and it only entered the airspace of the tanur, and a guy's halkab, so her milk has a din of a av, guys. And therefore, what will it be the status of a tanur? Tanur becomes a rishoy. And now all of the foods that are in the tanur become a sheni. Nit mahatana v'chol masher b'toicha. Halacha vav. Now, hold on. Kfar b'yanu, we already learned, right, in Shar Avei Satuma, Perek Yud, shahamashkin hayotzal mitful yom, that once these went to the mikvah, even though they have to wait until it gets dark, those body liquids, body secretions, einam tameyim, and therefore, im naflu afilu al kikar truma, that's susceptible to becoming tamei in a level of a shlishi, einam muchshar achayipul l'ratzayin, like any other liquids of tahirim, she'einam achshirim elol l'ratzayin. And we're going to learn more. We learned this in Perek Aleph. We're going to learn it actually today, in today's third chapter, more about this intent that's needed by hechsher. Halacha zayin. We're learning, guys, all about toldos of the 7 liquids. So let's move on to zeya, to sweat. V'halecha hasrucha, and pus. V'harei, and feces. We're speaking about the person has diarrhea, so it's watery. Umashkin hayotzim ben shmoyne chadashim, and liquids that emerge from a body of a child that did not, or from an infant that was not fully developed. V'hashoysim meitferi, if a person drinks the waters of Tiveria, which either is a very strong laxative. We're speaking about a person consumed it and it exited the body and it looks like water still. It doesn't look like human feces. It looks like water. Loses its status of liquids, and therefore, right, if a person drinks other liquids.
Excuse me. What's so meyuchad about Mei Tveria?
First of all, Mei Tveria, I think it's a pasha that's a laxative. In other words, if a person drinks a lot of Mei Tveria, what will that will cause a person to have a very strong diarrhea, to the point that what leaves the body looks like water. And Rambam is saying it doesn't have a status of water anymore. Once it goes through the human body, it has a status of feces, of re'i. And re'i is eina chashuv mashka. Now, if a person drinks other liquids, now we're speaking about not water. And the yatsu means they vomited it up. So we want to learn whether it changes its status. So the din is harei mashkin kishoy. Whereas if a person drank apple juice and they vomited it up, it's vaited apple juice. It's not the secretions of a body of a zav or whatever. She'ein sharamashkin t'chayrim baguf. Ketzad, for example, shosamayim tameim. Oh, if I care. If you drink not apple juice, the Rambam is giving the opposite direction. You drank waters that were tummy, and you spit it up. Now, what did we say? We said in Halacha Zayin that lecha serucha is pus, but lecha serucha can mean vomit. Vomit is not liquid. But so, what happens if a person drinks waters that are tummy and then they vomited it up? Will it lose its status? No, it doesn't. It remains what it was before. Harem tamei. Okay, as long as it's water. Now another thing.
Is it safe to learn? In other words, is it safe to learn that it needs to go through the process of digestion in order to change the status?
Exactly. If it goes through the body and it goes out over there in the bottom, then it's no longer water. That's exactly what the Rambam is going to say clearly. Befedish. Now, what happens if a person drinks waters that are tummy? Now, there's something unique about water. From all foods and all liquids, the only one that if it becomes tummy, it could be rendered pure by taking it to the mikvah is water. So if a person drank waters that are tummy and then the person goes to the mikvah, the chiddush will be those waters, yes, become pure because the person went into the mikvah. Now it's different. And therefore, if afterwards the person vomited it up, or if a person drank waters and he didn't go to the mikvah, the waters were tummy, but shenisrechu. Nisrechu means that there is a certain amount of time, Yakir, that when food is in your stomach, and my stomach begins to become disgusting. That's already different. Then it lost its status of water. And if it was water, that's tummy. It's not water and it's not tummy. Or Any time that a person drinks waters or liquids that are tummy, but it makes its way through the digestive tract, even though the person did not go to the mikvah, now it's no longer mayim. Now it's just a fluid from the body, and therefore harei tahoirim. Shasa sha'ar mashkin temeim. A person consumed. Now other mashkin is different than water, guys, because like we mentioned, only waters that are tamei could be made tahar by going to the mikvah. So if a person drank other mashkin, oil that was tamei, or a person ate achlin tameim, there going to the mikvah does nothing. Afal pisha tavel, and then the person vomited it up. It's tameim. Lefisha einam tahirim baguf. But that's only if they are somewhat what they were when you chew them and swallow them. But if nisrichu, now where do you draw the line? I don't know. But if it's considered already disgusting, even though you vomited it up, and certainly if it went through the body, then harei hein tahoirim. Clear. Halacha 9. Kfar biyarnu. In halacha zayin above right now, that sweat is not mashkin. Now, what happens if a person drank mashkin tameim? Person drank a lot of waters that were tummy, and you sweated it out. Here, we say that what you sweated out changed from its original form, and therefore zayasei tahoirim. Abel, in contrast, if a person goes into Mayim She'uvin, and we learned that midrabanan, the person becomes Tameh, Asheni, and then the person is Matama, the waters that are on him. And now he sweated, Zayasa is Tameyam, Gavaldik. Why? Because, the sweat in itself is not Tameh, but the waters on the body after this Mayim She'uvin mikvah is Tameh, and they're mixed together. And therefore, if a person dried oneself, and only afterwards they sweated, the moisture on the walls, on the inner walls of homes and shichin, they are not in the category of liquid at all, and therefore, even if right, harei zayasan remains tahoiram, which is quite amazing. In other words, you're kidding? No, the house, in the case where the house is tummy, if it would have a status of water, that's the whole thing. The 7 liquids acquire tuma, in part tuma, they're mashkin. No, it's not bechlal in the category of mashkin, but zeyas hamerchotz, but the moisture in the inner walls of a bathhouse, that's different. In other words, here you have like a schwitz, a steam room. So the steam is sticking onto the walls. That's mayim. They are mayim. And therefore, in all levels, if the merchatz is tameya, zeyasa tameya, imoisa troira, at least, but it has a status of mayim, and you bring peiros into the merchatz, and therefore the peiros will be imbued with moisture. Then yes, huchsharu, that is an act of being machshir the fruits. Again, we'll learn not in the next chapter, but in 2 chapters from now today about liratzoin, that if a food became wetted with the intent and desire and contentment of the owner, now it's considered muksher. It's considered muksher because you know it's going to get wet. Hichnis lakelim, if a person brought utensils into a bathhouse and waters, right, they collected on these utensils. Harei hamayim shaleim is considered waters that were separated intentionally. Umachshirin. That's another liner that again we're going to spend time in the 12th chapter, God willing, today, learning about that. When waters are flowing on the ground, waters, they're not yet able to be machshir foods. They have to first be uprooted, and this is considered they were uprooted with contentment, because that's what happens in a bathhouse. The waters from the bath, the waters from the whatever, from the pools, because of the heat, they evaporate, and therefore they are now considered mayim telusha. Halacha yudal. Habrecha shababayis. You have a pool in the house, and vahabayis mazia machmasa, and water collects on the walls. Imoisa abrecha tameya. Right before we were speaking about if the house itself was tummy. Now we're speaking about if the waters are tummy. Then indeed, zeyas kol habayis shemachmasa tameya. Halacha yud beis. What happens if you have 2 pools in the house? One of them is filled with tummy waters. One is filled with tired waters. So it says that Rambam, we go to where are you nearer to? right? All of the water collected on the walls that is nearer, closer to the pool that has tamei waters, tamei, kind of l'toyer toyer, mechsel mechsa, we are machmer and we say tam. Halacha Yud Gimel. Hamoichal. Hamoichal means the black liquid that flows from olives without them being intentionally pressed. Remember that. So it's the secretion of an olive. They have a din of shemen. Again, we're going into the toldos of the 7 liquids. Shemen is one of the 7 liquids. So is moichal. Mashkin hamenatfim in salei zeisam v'anovim. The liquids that are dripping from the baskets that have in it collected olives or grapes, wine and oil are both from the 7 liquids. That's einon mashke. Amazing. In other words, the liquid that flows out of the olives, moichal, is considered mashkin. But liquid that is dripping out of the baskets are not mashkin. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why is that. Because since the owner doesn't want for them to leave, and further than that, he doesn't need to collect them, both sides. He put them in baskets. If the owner would want to keep these fluids, he would put them in a normal pot, not in a perforated basket. Not at left birotza, not he wants it. That's very important how we classify something as liquid. And therefore it's not liquid, v'loy mistamin, and the v'loy machshirin, the moment he wants to gather it, that's different. Once you gather it, that means it's for him it's chashuv. Now, yes, it becomes a liquid. Halacha Yudaleh. A person is weighing novim grapes in a weighing pan, and what happens is again some of the secretions remain in the pan. Hayayin shebekaf ein mashka. The same logic. You didn't want for liquids to ooze, and you don't necessarily want to collect it. But if you pour it out of the pan into a keli, you're doing a maisa that's indicating you do give chashivas to it. Because even though it's not exactly the same, because salam baskets to begin with are perforated. Here, the pan of the weigh is not perforated. Yeah, but you put it there to weigh. You didn't put it there to collect. Halacha tezvah. A person over here. This is very important. You are crushing grapes. Kavan. Your intent is not for wine, clear. You want to push as many grapes as you could into the chaviz. That's clear. So you're squeezing it in there. You don't want the liquid. And let's remind ourselves that yodayim stam yodayim ashniyois. And that's why he's saying truma. Because normally shlishi becomes puzzle, can become a shlishi. Here we say harei hakol tor. In other words, what becomes clear is that when liquids are leaving either the grapes or the olives, you have to know whether they were pressed out intentionally. And even if they weren't, does the owner at least now want the liquids? If there is no need, no desire for that liquid, even though it came out of an olive, and we said that moichal kashemen doesn't matter. It's not chashuv yet, and it's not considered a liquid. Halacha 16, mashke beis hamitpachaim shebazora in the holy temple, in the area designated for the shchita. And what do you have over there? Not only do you have dam of kachem, and we said that dam shchita is one of the 7 liquids. On top of that, there was the water, right? The water system that they constantly unplugged, that was used to clear it out. So the floor is filled with blood and water. Says the Rambam, they never can acquire tumah, which is gavaldik mamash, because it prevents tumah from spreading in the holy temple. Those 2 liquids, not the dam nor the mayim, the einam mistamim, they don't acquire tumah, therefore they can't impart tumah, nor are they machshir. Where do we get that from? It's convenient, yeah. That's what God Almighty said, and it's passed down in tradition. And therefore, kol demei asvachim gavaldik einam makabel tumah ve'einam machshir. Now that's going to be a gavaldik thing, because as we learned and we'll repeat that every time you shecht an animal, biblically, since dam shchita is from the 7 liquids, we consider all of the meat of the animal already to be muhshir. Now, I know that people are remembering Chibas HaKodesh Machsharton. The Rambam is going to write about that later. In other words, we're saying that by Kachim, it doesn't even need to become wetted because it's so chashuv, it's ki'ilu. That, the Rambam holds that's the Rabbanan. But on a biblical level, we have a halacha, Mepiyah Kabbalah, the dam of Kachim and the mayim and the bazara, they're not mitamin and they're not machshir. V'hoyil v'dam HaKachim ain't a machshir, which is great. Kachim, shenishchadu bazara, lo yuchshiru b'dam shchita. Not like normal chulin animals. Ve'ein l'bsar HaKachim hechshir, Ella, if mashkin she'iplu ala basar chutz v'mashkin basically with the chaim, it's much harder for that to happen, which is great. And again, the Rambam is not going to ignore this concept of Chibas HaKodesh. The Rambam is going to write about it soon, and the Rambam is going to make it clear that's a rabbinic. Halacha Yud Zayin, which is the final halacha of this Peirik. Wow. Paras Kochim Shevira Banot. Now, what happens is giving an example. You are bringing a para to be slaughtered in the Beis HaMikdash, and you walked it through a river, and by the time you came to the Beis HaMikdash and you shechted it, the hide, the outer skin of the animal is still saturated with water that came from that river. That's mayim. Ushchata. Vadayim mashka tefeach olel. And a chanami. Now, by the way, when the animal is alive, it's not shaykh for it to become mukhshar. Now that you shechted it, if it's still wetted, the halacha mepiyah Kabbalah was only from the water that is there in the azara. Doesn't exclude the mayim that's on the skin of the animal. And therefore, there's practical applications. You can't say, well, so what if there was a keli that's tamei, which is common, relatively common, that animal is mukshar. Halacha mepiyah Kabbalah, it was wet from the nod. Harei abasar tamei. V'chein another did. If we know that the animal's mouth was muzzled from when it entered Yerushalayim, and that means that any item that is inside the animal's digestive tract, which is what would happen, he would swallow a needle, certainly happened outside Yerushalayim. Now, don't forget, guys, that the Chachamim made a gzeira. If you remember this in Sharav Esatumos, that all kelim chutz l'Yerushalayim are tamei midrabanan. So, if the animal's mouth was not muzzled, we can always say, swallow the needle inside Yerushalayim, which is already a good thing. If we know that this machat came into the animal chutz l'Yerushalayim, afa pisha ena machat yodua, but because of this gezeira midrabanan, harei abasar tamei. Guys, we're only speaking about a case where this animal got wet from waters outside the Beis HaMikdash, and it became mokshar. Now, in contrast, if nimsas hamachad baperesh, if you find a keli, in the example, the common keli is a needle. The animal swallows unwillingly when it's eating food, and it's in its waist. Here we say that the meat is basar. Why is that? Because the needle is not touching the flesh itself. If you remember, guys, that the magas base hasasarim is not called negia. Elama, it can be matama the animal when it leaves the animal. It left into the e. Regardless, the Rambam writes to remind us that even when the animal became mukshar, your hands are tohoirois. She'ein tumas hayadayim hamikdash k'moi shebe'arnu sha'ar ovis hatumois perek ches. Now, that meat of kachim doesn't become mukshar from the blood of the shchita, nor from the mayim that's b'toy chazara, and that's take a halacha mipiyah Kabbalah. That's liyos habasar tomei b'din toira. Abed lihistame midivneihem. If it comes to rabbinic tumas, of course it could acquire tumah. It doesn't even need to become wet. Eina kodesh tzarech echsher, because of the klal chibas hakodesh machsheres habasar, and therefore v'im naga boy tumah ben kala ben chamura. The good thing is that there's no stam yudayim in the Beis HaMikdash, which is great. But if there's another source of tumah, then nifsal afa pisha lehuksha b'mashka k'moshe b'yarnu, but midrabanan, which also would mean that toilin v'loy sarfin, but you can't eat it. L'chaim, that was great. Okay, we're moving on to today's second chapter. We're learning now the 11th chapter of Hilchos Tumas Oicholin. We're going to have a whole chapter that's going to focus specifically on grapes and olives. From what point on are they considered mukshar? This chapter has 17 halachis, and it's going to be very involved and fun. Freilach, Vaharev Lanu, soll sein sweet, Halacha Aleph. Haboitzer Anov. A person is harvesting grapes. But in the Mishnah, the word harvesting is not one word used for all of the fruits. Every fruit has its own word. So let's go about Bitsida. Bitsida is for enough. Right? Moisek. Moisek Zesav.
Clear Hebrew.
The Hebrew stole it from us. Those Zionists. Not always, some of it. I can't hear you, Akir. I missed you.
I said Betsira is a Navim and Mesika is all.
Very good. Okay, very good. So Haboitzer Anovim, if a person is harvesting grapes. Now I want to know, was it harvested to eat or whether it was harvested to make it into wine? That will be the first thing you have to know. So if you harvest it, Limkar Bashuk, want to sell it in the market, which is going to be done, we consider that food items. Or Liyapsham, you want to dry them out to make them into raisins, you preserve them longer for food. Then we say, they are not right away considered mukhshar, only unless they come into contact with any one of the 7 liquids, with the desire of the owner for them to become wet. You know, what we're trying to point out is that in the process of harvesting grapes, there's certainly a possibility that some of the fluids of the grape itself will ooze out. We don't consider that liquid, and it's food. In contrast, that will be the yesod of the whole payday. But if a person is harvesting grapes, but the intent is to crush them to make them into wine, then listen to this: they are automatically considered susceptible mukhshar lituma. Even if you know a fact, it did not get wet at all, and therefore ve'im naga by tuma, yes, it will acquire tuma. Now, why is that? If I know these grapes never became wet. So the Rambam says that what? If you remember, going back every now and then, this is one of the Shmoina Asar Davar that we have over there in the Sechta Shabbos, where there were more Talmidei Beishame, more than Talmidei Beisilol, and that became the halach. Now, why did they make that Gezerah? The Rambam quotes the reason. That it automatically has a status of here grapes that are mukhshar, sin shepa'amim sha'odam nichlas lekarmo. Sometimes a person goes into one's vineyard, later to know if it's ripe enough. How do you know whether the grapes on the vines are ripe to be harvested? That the way you do it is you take a ganze eshkol, you squeeze it to see. Now what happens is that if I have some juice of the grapes in my hand because of my vidika, I don't want to lose it. I'm going to smear it on anovim habetsurais. If I have next to me harvested grapes, I'm going to put it on it. And why is that? Because I don't want to lose that liquid when a person is harvesting it for it to be squeezed. Now, in that case, the person biratzain put liquid on top of the grapes. Does that always happen? No, but that's something that's common. Another reason for oid, meaning that if they are going to be wet, when they get wet with whatever liquids ooze out, you don't care. On the other hand, when you are harvesting grapes for wine, you don't want to lose anything. So in the eventuality where some juices will ooze out on its own, you don't want to lose that. You prefer for it not to fall on the ground. In other words, the liquids are considered liquids that you want to be vir. The nimsa mukshan mehen or bahen. And therefore they made a gzeda, shahaboitza legas, even if none of the above happened, automatically hukshar. We're going to have something.
You don't want them to become wet. You want them to be not lost. I don't understand.
Whenever you are harvesting it right now, you want it to be wet. We're going to see soon, actually, Kevan, maybe you're remembering from the Gemara, that when it comes to olives, there are more conditions to this. Because when olives are wet too early, it actually ruins it.
Right.
We're going to have something similar, not the same, but by grapes, in the case where it's already borderline ready to be harvested. In those scenarios, the person wants for the liquid to be on the olives.
Got it.
Halacha base. Now, if a person is harvesting grapes, that you're doing it to sell it, but you know that if I won't find customers, then I'll crush them for juice. In other words, it wasn't to crush, but you knew already that whatever won't be sold today in the market will be crushed. Since right now you're going to take it first to the market, then it's still not considered mukhshar. Lo yukhsharu. When will it change? It's amazing. You have to actually bring it into the grape press. And you know what? The moment you do it, you enter the gas, it's halachically considered mukhshar. Now I know, guys, wait more about the olives because there's going to be a few more qualifications. But it is similar, including in this halacha, that once it comes to this place, in other words, you harvested grapes, same thing, to sell them in the market. Now, when you harvest olives, let me just speak it out. In order for you to make it into oil, there was another step, which we'll clarify soon, which is called those olives have to have gemar malach. And any olives that get wetted prior to their gemar malacha are not mukhshar. We'll speak that out soon. But once you bring them l'reshus habad, here also they're considered mukhshar, as we'll explain soon. Halacha gimel. A person is harvesting grapes, and you place them in an oven in a storage pit. Now we're speaking about a scenario where these grapes did not get wet, or I'll tell you better. We're speaking about a case. No, we're speaking about a case where you harvested the grapes to eat, or to dry, or to sell in the market, right? So they're not mukhshar. And what did you do? You didn't take it to the market. You put it in this oven. Or if you spread them out on top of leaves. Now, why would you spread it on top of leaves and not on top of the ground? When you want to make it into raisins, right? So then if you don't care b'chlal about its liquid, you would spread it to be dried out, but on top of the ground. Whenever you spread it on top of leaves, is that because you want that the liquids that will ooze out of it should be collected in these leaves.
Is the avid naturally moist?
No, but if now there's liquid in it, no, you're doing it to sell it. But the fact that you gathered it in a place that if liquids will ooze out, you want to collect those liquids. That's the halacha gimel. So yes, because which is why you put it in an oven and not in a basket, yakir. Or in other words, you dafka put it in a keli that will contain, or that's why you spread it on top of the leaves. No, don't begin and learn this chapter and stop over here. Okay, I did it to sell it in the market. That's the rule, but now there's nuances. Taka to sell it, but if I did something that is showing I want to collect the liquids, and therefore not on mehem tamei or mish other tameos, indeed, Timon halacha in the middle of in Gimel batzar. If you harvest it, then nasal salim. In contrast, you place them into baskets. Or you spread it out on top of the earth, then we say because the very fact you put it there means you don't care for the liquids. Therefore, even though they're split open, splitting open means that we know for sure that liquids oozed out of it. Based on the beginning of this chapter, because you gathered it lachilam, givaldik. When a person who removed these grapes from baskets, or when a person removed it and he ate it, and now what? And you have a nice amount. A saw is around 8-9 liters, or double that. And now that you finished eating, you threw it into the gas. It's amazing. Still, in other words, when you gathered it la'achilam, it's amazing, Yakir. Even when you throw it into the vat, you still have in your mind that if someone else will come and want to eat, he'll take it out of the gas. In halacha base, a person had in mind both. That's different. Here you had in mind only to eat. then even putting it into the gas doesn't yet make it mukhshar. Okay, these are the rules. Allah Chadal. Another shoyu besalim. Grapes, these types of grapes, again, they were harvested to sell or to eat, and they're in baskets, or b'mashtiach shaladam, on top of some sort of spread on the earth, in which the owner doesn't care at all about collecting its liquids. And v'lakach mehem l'darchan, and now you changed your mind. You consciously changed your mind. See, before in the end of Halacha Gimel, you threw it in there. Here you said, now I'm going to trample it. Boom, that's it. After you had in mind, make sure your hands are not tummy. And don't forget, guys, that even though your daim stami daim ashniyos, and we're speaking about chulin, just review these halachas midrabanan. If stam yodayim touch mashkin, they make it into a tchila, make it into a rishon, and now the grapes will become a sheni. Halachei kerem shuam in the beis hapras. Another halach. Someone planted a vineyard in a beis hapras. A beis hapras is a field in which a cavern was plowed over, and midrabanan, its earth is metama bemaga ubemasa. Or let me word it differently: if you walk on it, you become tamei. You might have touched the etzem kisoira. You become tamei midrabanan on a level of an av. And some genius planted a vineyard here. Now we're trying to do everything we could to figure out how to retain the status of tara. So this is what the Rambam says. Even though we learned in Halacha Aleph that the moment you harvested it for its wine, midrabanan, it becomes mukhshar. If that would be the case, then automatically it would acquire tuma. But it's like two drabanans together, so they were lenient. But up until a point, eino mukhshar, as long as it is in the beis hapras, a big leniency. Why did they say that? And another thing, what we learned in this chapter in Halacha Aleph, haboitz legas is only midivrayim. Like, it's like exeda l'gzeda. So hey, kelu l'gzeda zu, v'legosru aleh shiyamukhshad at sheyetze mi beis hapras. However, guys, don't forget that the moment it leaves the beis hapras.
Rabbi, I beg your pardon. Please explain this again. I'm lost. Sure.
You're not lost. If a person planted a vineyard in a beis hapras, we learned in Halacha Aleph this chapter that when you harvest the grapes, we need to know what your intent is. If your intent is legas, it's automatically mukhshar.
Right.
If I go into a beis hapras midrabanan, I become tamei. Now that it's automatically mukhshar, if we were to put these two rabbinics together, all of the grapes and the liquids that will flow out of it is tamei midrabanan. On a level of a rishon, because I become an av midrabanan. Says the Rambam, they didn't do that. They said that as long as I am still in the beis hapras, I cannot impart tuma to those grapes that did not get wet. The moment the grapes leave the beis hapras, I should not be holding it, as we'll see soon. If I harvested a novim from a kerem that was planted in a beis hapras, then we have to make sure that the guy that harvested takes it until the boundary of the field and he passes it to someone who's out there. But they were lenient that in the beis hapras, we don't put these two rabbinics together. Now, so first of all, look at all the steps. First of all, the people that harvest, don't forget, Yakir, what the leniency is that if I was tahar, even though me going into the beis hapras makes me acquire tuma midrabanan, that is something they set aside in the beis hapras. But maybe I was tamei before. So b'chlal, when you hire workers amaratzim to make wine, you have to be metayer them. You have to be metayer the kalim. And at kedei kach, that maybe these people are tamei b'tmei meis. Umaz aleim shlish yushvi, umarav shimshon. You have to do even more steps. In other words, they were lenient, but they wanted a very beautiful. It's not always. They were lenient on one hand, for people not to think that we can be noya kulam. They made new chumras that if you are going in there, you have to go through the whole process. Ki'ilu you were tumei meis. Kedei lahakir, to make it clear, she'en makilim tumei meis hapras. We're only doing it because it's a suffix, and on top of that, the grapes are not wetted. Elamah, there's a drabanan that when you harvest grapes, legas, automatically it's keilu, it's mukshar. That is something that we're lenient in. So mitzat sheni, First, you underdo steps to make it clear that you're very careful with tumantara. Then, now the irony will be that all the guys that entered Yakir, aside of for these grapes, they are considered coming makes midrabanan, and they're going to harvest. They're going to bring it up until right outside, but right afterwards, they themselves cannot continue to carry it because they are coming midrabanan. Outside the Beis HaPras, they'll be mitama those grapes. So and furthermore, even if the boitzrim touch those people, Yakir, if I'm an Av midrabanan and I touch you, you become a Rishon. When you become a Rishon, you touch the grapes, you make it into a Sheni. And therefore, if they would be contact, and they will be Tamadanovid. Okay, clear. We were only lenient of not consider it mukshad when the anavim are in the Beis HaPras. Halacha vav. Now we're moving on. Similar but not the same. Similar but not the same to olives. We're obviously only speaking about anavim and zaysim because these are the only two liquids, right, that are not made peiros. These are from the shiva mashke, wine and oil. So let's go to that. Mesika is bitzira, but mesika is the lashon that's used when it comes to olives. You are harvesting your grapes, either likivashim, you want to pickle them, means you want to eat them, you want to preserve them, not make them into oil machrim b'shuk, or you want to sell them. So now loy huchshiru at sheyipfu alei mashkin bir ratzain, like any other eichalim. And again, next chapter will be more about this ratz. Now comes a detail in which olives are less susceptible than grapes. That's what Kevin was mentioning before. Even when you harvested it to take it into the Beis Habad, into the olive press, there is a phase that's called Gemar Melacha. In other words, there are certain steps of work that's required, right, to prepare them for the pressing. And up until when all of that was prepared, even if they get wet, Yakir, even if they get wet, they also won't be mokshed. We'll open this up. Now, yes, now what we are saying, let's first focus on that the moment the olives reach Gemar Malacha, very similar to the grapes, they are automatically considered mokshed. Why? Even though you didn't see it getting wet. So the Rambam says, there's a chazaka that you have moichal. Moichal, we already learned what that word means. It's the liquid that flows out of the olives without them being pressed. There was such a fluid. Now, we learned in the previous chapter about the moichal. At this point, you want for that liquid to have wetted the olives, because once the olives reach Gemar Malacha and now they have this moichel on them, it's good. It makes them softer, and the softer the olives are, which is one of the things people would need to do, then the better, the easier it is to crush them. Before they reach the stage, as the Rambam will describe in a moment, of now it's Gemar Malacha, even if you saw moichel leaving, and the moichel de facto are on these olives, and you harvested it to make it into oil, it's not machsherit. Why? Because you don't want it to be wetted with moichel. And that's very important, guys, that if olives
Rabbi, do you think
wet,
in today's age,
too early, not only will it not make it soft and easy, it's going to ruin the olives. Yes, Yakir.
I'm thinking, do you think if in today's age where there is machinery and there's no longer need to step on the olive, is it still machshir?
In other words, we have to know, let me just word it this way, we have to know how to apply these halachas to the modern process. The concept will be the same. At some point, wherever Yakir, it's advantageous for these olives to have moichel on it, whenever that phase is, then they're automatically mukshad. Even if you didn't see it, chazak. Maybe Yakir is right. Maybe with modern machinery, maybe there's no longer a chazak. Maybe they know how to harvest it without losing. I don't know. You have to know how to apply. The concepts we're learning. Lefikach, therefore, say sim shalanigan malachton. Even if, see, that's the word. If it didn't reach Gemar Malacha, olives, forget about the moichel, any liquids, other liquids that are tummy. Now, another guy's just chazer. Any one of the 7 liquids that are tummy, that are already tummy, if they touch food, even if the food was not yet muchshar, normally we say they become tummy. Why? Because hechshedon, the tumasam comes bebasachas. But hechshedim has to be with the desire of the owner. That Rambam was pointing out that olives, prior to a point, you never want it to be wet. And therefore, now once another detail. Ein tummy elomakin magoy. This is such a good chazar. Now, even though you don't want the olives to become wet, but the place of contact does become tummy. Wow, wow, wow. And that's the rule.
Why?
Because it's food, because the olives are food. Now, 1 second. Here's the thing. If it came to the time of Gemar Melacha, Kevan, then we say that all of the olives are in the smoichal. It's all moist. And therefore, if there was something tamei having contact with any part of this collection of olives, they all are considered to have had contact with the source of tumah. If there's no Gemar Malacha, so yeah, we don't consider the moichel to combine them all. But the Rambam, another nuance, that actual location that's saturated with the mashkin tameim, that does become tamei. However, once naflu aleya mashkim tameim achar shenignu malachton, here's what we are saying: nitmu kulam, because shahamashkin hatameim metamin es hamoichel shabehem. What really happens is that we keep on emphasizing that these liquids are tamei and they're machshir. The moichel itself becomes tamei. The moichel is 1 unit liquid, and now the moichel is matame everything. Shahamoichel sheyotza mehem achar gemar malachton chashuk mashke umistame umachshir. Moichel that left it, guys, before gemar malachton is not considered mashkin, and the mashkin today was dam, right? Dam tamei. The dam that touched that olive will become tamei. That's the word. Because that olive is oichel. And any oichel that has contact with mashkin tameim, it becomes machshir and tamei bebasachas. Halacha zay. Chavish shel zeisem migul golim, a jug of olives. Migul golim means that they rolled over, but it means, guys, that they were salted and pressed together. These were the normal steps that were done prior to crushing them. So says the Rambam, tzarech linkoiv hechavius k'dei sheyotzei hamoichal. In other words, do you want that juice? Is that juice? You have to do an action that indicates that you don't want the juice, which would be you perforated that keli. And if you didn't make such a perforation, you put it in a chavius. You know that moichel is going to ooze out. If you didn't do something to get rid of the moichel, that means you want that moichel. The moment you want it, it's considered mashkin. Harei elu muksharim. Now, what happens if you perforated the chavius? The moichel didn't flow out because of the dregs that clogged the holes. And the harei hein belulim b'moichel. And now these zeisim are saturated in the moichel. Edu muksharim. Because she'ein b'ritzoynoi. Sharei, the fact that you did an act of perforating the keli, even though if it didn't work, you expressed your intention that you don't want it. If you harvested grapes for pressing, so we keep on speaking about this Gemar Malacha. Okay, when is it? Gemar Malachton says that Rambam, you have to first finish harvesting it all, and it should be munachin umochanim ledricham. In other words, when the entire harvest has been completed and they are deposited in one place, like we had in the beginning of this chapter by grapes. Once you have the Gemar Malacha by olives, yes, if it was harvested for oil, it is like grapes, even though you know that no other exterior mashkins dripped them. Mashkin, nothing left of it. Automatically, but unlike grapes, if it was koydem shadigar malachten, even not if you don't know, You know it was crushed, and the grapes he sweated, it secreted, and they're stuck together because of the juices. Eino muksharim. Now, what happens if you completed the harvest, but you, even though that this area was completely harvested, you want to add to this pile. You're bringing it from another location. The quantity that you're going to add is very little, relatively. But the Rambam says, don't make tricks. Hashem knows what's really going on over here. Because if I am just trying to prevent things from becoming tamei, I'm good. I'm going to bring another kav, and I really don't need to do that. I don't intend to do that. Then it's not going to work. You can't do haram. Right. Gomar milikach. You completed your purchase of olives. That's all the olives you have. But you intend to borrow money or to borrow olives and to add to it. It's not yours that you didn't harvest. You understand, Yakir? You're going to do more, but it's not even yours. And then you actually didn't do it. Doesn't matter. And therefore, because they were never mukshar. Halacha 9. If a person stores one's olives in 2 olive presses, tebata means 2 olive presses, which means it's all yours, but you intend to press them separately. So what's Gemar Malach done? When you harvested and gathered it in one place, we don't connect one to the other because they're going to be pressed separately. That one automatically, like we are saying, even though it's not wet at all. Halacha Yud. When you harvest olives, the Galil Ha'elyon in the area in Eretz Yisrael called the Galil Elyon, and va'asid lo hiridan l'Galil Tachton. So here again, when it comes to Gemar Melacha, ein mekabelin tuma atri hiridan l'Galil Tachton, because like we keep on mentioning, if it gets wet too much earlier prior to it being pressed, the liquid is going to ruin it. But when do we say that you get all of that period? If you had in mind to take it to Galil Tachton prior to you harvesting it. When I harvested it, Yakir, and I gathered them in one place. So now halachically it's Gemar Gamalach. Can my kavanah revert it back? Ein machshava mayelas. Elo huksharu. Another did. Gomar Azesav. You purchased olives, or you harvested olives for the intent of selling it. That's how we began. Again, by olives and grapes, they are similar. Asid lechapoisen ba'alin. But if you gather the grapes and you put them in certain types of vats, and you want them to be properly protected until when you will squeeze them. So here the question is, if I harvested it for squeezing yakir, you have to have a Gemar Malacha, gathering them also meant covering them. What happens if I only covered them with leaves? That's good enough. Because I protected them. Weiter. Halacha Yud Aleph. Now the concept of Dira B'Tachtonim, of bringing Torah into the LA district of who knows what, of transportation, which is what Kavan is doing, is Mamash Gavaldik. And Halavai, they can hear us. We'll talk over there. Halacha Yud Aleph. Halakeyach ma'atan zeisim min hagoy. So here, a person purchased a whole vat, a storage vat of olives from a goy. Even if,
think which halacha?
Halacha Yud Aleph.
Okay,
Im yesh masik al pnei adama. If there is more, even if there's more on the ground, in other words, this concept, guys, of Gemar Malacha, that I harvested it all, Yakir, doesn't have to come from a Yid. If a goy owns it and the goy harvests it, but that was the end of the harvest, it's also called Gemar Malach. So if I buy an entire vat from a goy even if de facto there are other olives somewhere, I don't say maybe the guy had in mind to harvest that as well. The vat was full. He sold me the vat. The presumption is it reached the Gemar Malacha, and therefore it comes automatically. The moment it's Gemar Malacha, we said Midrabanan and it's Mukhshar. And we don't know what happened to these olives, so we have to presume and have all that oil Yasa Betuma. No, that's a chiddush. And we're not lenient. We don't say 1 second, there were other olives ready to be harvested somewhere. The guy didn't harvest those. He sold you the vat. That was completed for him. However, on the other hand, and Yakir is making with his head, for those who can't see, shaking his head with excitement. Yes. The Neman Ama'aretz Loimad, but an Ama'aretz, which in certain areas has no trustworthiness, here he does. We do believe him. Matan Zeh Loi Gemartiv, which is Gavaldik. So it was not mukhshad when I bought it from it. Halacha Yudbeis. Haroitza litel mizeisim shaloi nigmer malachten vil lidroich. In other words, it's not Gemar Malachi. I want to trample on some of those. So the din is, since it's not mukhshad, listen to this. I can take them when I'm tummy, and I can bring them into the Beis Abad bituma. Umachasa ashar bituma. And we don't say, Yakir, that since I took out of this gathering a little bit, now that this is going to go into the press now, we don't say that. We don't say that. A person places his olives in some sort of olive press, but not because he's going to press them right now. He places them in there in order for them to become softer. If he placed them in there first to spend some time, and then for him to salt it afterwards, that's not Gemar Malach. Because he wants to pickle it. Very good. And whenever you want to pickle it, we began that whenever you want to pickle it, you don't want to lose any juice. So there's no, you don't even want for the liquid to ooze out. Halacha Yudal. Say means that you crushed open, right? You rubbed, you break apart. So now the din is psalam. Why?
To preserve them, you crush them a little bit.
Very good. So the din is because your act of poitseya mitapei is called the Gemar Malacha. Your Yodayim are Shniyos. Truma becomes a Shlishi. Indeed, they become a Shlishi. But if you broke them open or rubbed them open or broke them apart, only L'safkam B'melach, so the Melach is the Gemar Malach. Now it's not yet Gemar Malach, even though your Yodayim are Tameos. Lo Yuksharu. Some only to know that was your intent, not to actually not to actually do anything with them. You just want to know where they're at in their maturity. Then also lo yuchshurum. Halacha tes. Well, we have to get moving. You put them into a gas, but you want for them to lose their moisture. You want to dry them out. Afilu, they are very high up, so you know that the bottom will not get dry so quick. Einam muksharim. However, if you put them into your house because you want them to spoil, the word spoiling is you want them to soften, for them to dry it over there, or if you put them on the roof, but you're not going to leave them to dry it on the roof, you're going to take them down for whatever reason. In other words, even though they still need this next step, now that they are already laid out, Nesanim abayis achi igmanas gagoy or yache lichlam makam acher ena muksharim adayin lenigam melachton halacha tezayin ha'oitin zeisav reshus ha'ma'aretz. What are you doing? You are storing your olives in a domain belonging to an ha'ma'aretz. And what's the fear? That maybe he touched it. So here are the rules. If you both lock the door and you seal that door, eino choishes shemi yesh l'maftech acher v'choisem acher. And furthermore, a big leniency. Even if you find your seal broken, and you see that the mafteyach, the lock, was unlocked, we presume that we don't say that he touched it. Maybe a ganef wanted to break in and then he ran away. And this type of lock doesn't even have to be a good lock or good seal. It can be even a tzeroy, some sort of stone, or a kesem or slivel of wood. However, if there are cracks, here again we're lenient. He might have moved it. They are considered like doors that have to be closed and sealed. And if that happened, then we don't consider this to be olives that were stored in the domain of an amoritz. Halacha Yud Zayin, the final halacha of this chapter. So you're trampling it while you're tummy, which means that the oil was tummy. Now the oil got absorbed in your kalim. You want to make another production of oil, but you want that to be taught. So we're going to learn a little bit dinim of kashering kalim. You want to be matayed the kalim of the beis abad, and the ekel are the borders that they would place around, some sort of wooden borders that they would place around the olives. So when they're being pressed, they don't spread, they remain contained. They are absorbed in the past oil that's tamei. How do you expurge? How do you get rid of? How do you make these kalim be poilate? They shemen that's tamei. Kalim shalates or avanim. All you need to do is madicha, and you have to wash them thoroughly. If they're made out of nitzarim reeds, and you just have to dry them. If they're made out of gemi doesn't dry out easily. Then beyashnan kol shnei masor chodesh, you have to wait a year, or you have to put very hot water on it, whether it's water or whether it is water in which olives were cooked, or you put them under a tzinor, under a drain pipe that the waters are constantly flowing. Or if you put it, you have to put it inside a stream of water. For how long? For 12 hours. And then the Rambam is writing something else. See, we're talking about absorption of oil that's tummy. There's another issue. The keli became tummy. For that, you have to take it to the mikveh. Don't confuse one with the other. But you understand, take it to the mikveh after you got rid of the balua oil, and now umishtamish behem betara. Givaldik. Now, guys, we're learning today's final chapter. Perek Shnei Masar of Hilchos Tumas Eichalin is a very important chapter because we keep on mentioning the words that for something to become mukhshar, it has to be wetted. And we're going to learn both the waters, if it's water, needs to be uprooted, b'ratzein haba'alim, and it has to be placed on the food after the food was cut off the ground with the contentment of the owner of the food. This chapter, 12th chapter, has 12 halachas. Let's begin with halacha al. All of the laws involving food that has to first be made susceptible to becoming tamei. And if it was not made susceptible, even though a source of tumah had contact with it, it does nothing. You should know divrei kabbalah. And with Priya Shmuel Lamdu, that it says in the Torah in Parsha Shmini, v'chiyutan. Remember, yitain, yutan, that was the limud. The chiyutan mayim al zera. First of all, mayim doesn't only mean mayim. Echad mayim ve'echad shar shiva mashkin. That will render the foods mukshar, but hushinas and aleim beratzin ba'alim. Because yitain means the owner placed it with kavana. The Torah acts, the vowels are yutan. It happened automatically, right? Aim la mikra, aim la mesoides. That was the reconciliation. Ba'achad, another. The foods only become mukhshad even if the water was placed. B'retzoin ba'alim, if the food was nekrom in a karka, has to be that way, says the Rambam. Because if you don't need for the food first to be uprooted from the ground, why does the Torah have to write v'chiyutan mayim al zera? Everything that's planted will be wet. Don't forget, dew is also one of the 7 liquids. You're kidding? While it's growing, it's wetted a lot. And the final is that the liquids also have to be displaced, as we'll see in a moment. Okay, we already looked on the Pedic base. Water's flowing on the ground, cannot be machshir. Halacha base. If liquids first fell on the food, now what happens if there was the beginning, the original, and then the ultimate intent? So if initially the owners were content, even she'ein soifer b'ratzin, that ultimately the owner is not pleased, or the opposite direction, that the shesoifroi, ultimately he was happy. But when it fell, he was not happy. In either case, since there was a time of ratzin, yes, hichshe. It's only if nafal shaloi b'ratzinoi, then ein machshir. Now, Filo Balahu Peres Nesakana gives an example of ratzin. How do you define ratzin? Right, in Chassidus we have Primis Harotzen, Chitzonius Harotzen. He's going to give an example. A person has a ganav, God forbid, running into his house. He has a barrel of water. He takes his produce and he puts it in the barrel. Puts it in the barrel for the ganav not to see what he has. That's not Rotzen. He wanted it to be hidden, but he didn't want it to get wet. There was no breda. Not since Sikresha, like in other, we don't say it out over here. I feel ball who, but he hid it because of a danger or because of some sort of external need. But for who ain't a Rotzoyne Shibboleth, but he doesn't want them to be wet. He doesn't want them to be wet. For example, because of the Ganovim. Or you are traveling and it's very heavy, and you're traveling near a river, and you know you can put things that float in water, you put them in the water, and why should you schlep it? Let the water schlep. So there's no sakana. You didn't want it to get wet. You just didn't want to have to pick up 100 pounds. Verstehst? That's called shaloi beratzen. Beautiful. Halachigim. Mashkin shenitl shumen hakakar shaloi beratzen. Another thing. That liquids that they themselves, they're not on the ground, but they were uprooted from the ground without your ratzon. Einon machshirin lefikach adam hakelim oy peirush shenivlu b'mashkin that were picked out of the ground shaloi beratzen. Even though those liquids touched the acholum beratzen, in other words, if you missed the first step, if the mayim were not uprooted beratzen, those mayims cannot be machshir, even if the act of hechshir was beratzen. Chevra, this is Gan Eden. These are the rules. Lo yochshiru sharei oisen hamayim shaloi l'ratzen itlashu ukeilo ein bakarka, and mayim on the karka ein a machshirim. Hoya mayim shenachol adam alakelim al peres lushu beratzen. Now everything together. And everything happened the way it should happen for the act of hechsher. And now yes, for example, I have a keli, I have a bowl, and I don't have running water, and it's raining, and I place my bowl outside on top of the wall. My intent is for the bowl to be washed. What does that mean, guys? I want my bowl to get wet. So when rain is flowing down from the heavens, it also has a din of water on the ground. It's not yet uprooted. But since it went into the bowl, I wanted the bowl to get washed. Not that I put it in there, but I wanted that to get wetted. Hamayim Shabbos considered uprooted, and now it can be mash. And now, what happens in contrast if I put a bowl, a plate on the wall? I didn't care for my plate to get washed. I didn't want for my wall to get wet. I put it to prevent the water of getting on the wall. And now there's some water in the plate that's nothing. And now even if I place a paytas in the water, in the bowl, and I want for it to be wet, what happens if a person actually had water, okay? You had water. These waters are not yet tolush, like we had before. And now I overturned the bowl to have the water flow on the wall. It depends. If it's on a house that was built, even though, guys, now the house is connected to the ground, but the building materials were originally tolushin, because the water is in the wall, it's on something that's considered uprooted. And now, if those waters went on produce, they are mushid. But if you have a cave, which means even though the waters in the bowl are not tolush because I only wanted to protect my wall. Now that I turned over the bowl to wash the wall, it's a wall of a cave. Wow, halacha now. You bend down to drink water. And now when you drink some water, if some water is going to be in your mouth, you're going to have some water in your mustache, they are considered telushin beratz. So there is a certain type of secretion, even though you didn't have to want for your mustache to get wet, because you know, and the hoil, the shasa, birit soina, you didn't act, beratzain. Maybe if there's also water in your nose, the lavdafka was going to go into your nose, or in your head, or in your beard. You didn't want for that to happen. If you fill up a barrel, if you fill a jug from a well, now the water in the jug, guys, you uprooted beratzen. Question here is, and Kevin is going to put a picture, maybe what will be the status of the water that is on the rope that was tied around the jug that went into the well. Didn't necessarily need it. But we learned that if it's a psik reisha, then it's considered v'ratzin. So the water that goes after it, and water that's on the rope, but the rope that's mechoinen al savara, that's wrapped around its opening, and ubachevel, and any part of the rope that was needed to bring the jug back up, not excess rope. That's called telushin b'ratzain. That will be like the mouth, the mustache. But if you have a rope, the rope was no longer than needed. You didn't need for that to be there at all. You don't want for water to be in the rope. You can't say psik. You don't want that. It's like in your nose. And if telushin b'ratzain, another thing. The son of Tachazat here is different. Here you're not slapping up water, but you're placing water under a drain pipe because you want to be mekabel that water. Now you're not putting the water in there. Kol hamayim shal gabo ubachevel einam telushin b'ratzin. We're more lenient, right? And therefore, lefikach ein machshirin. I'll tell you more than that. You don't want for the water of the jug to be spilled out. You want for the water of it. So as it's going down, it's still not considered tolush. Even if the person is an abatuma. Even has a dark picture here, which is fine. Hamayim sha'alav, we're moving on right. The water on the person, guys, how cup? There's some nuances here. Even though they're flowing down, the vart is that the water is descending on its own. The water is not descending with a person's effort. It's not moving on the body with willingly. It touched me. I'm tummy, not tummy yet. To hide him, the waters remain tummy, but the waters cannot be on me for a long amount of time. What has to happen? This person has to shake it off immediately. How do you define immediately? I don't know. But these are gavaldic ideas. I am an av. So what? The waters were not uprooted. They are on me. So what? They're flowing down. But if they are flowing down slowly, however you define slowly, now when they are leaving my body, slowly means now it's considered talush. Now that it left my body, mistamin. Wow. Now they acquire tumah. Now ubizman shehem tohoirin, einon machshirin. Why? Shaharei einom telushim olav liritzoinoi. So there's mistamin and machshirin. If the waters are tahar, when the waters are tahar, very good. In the case of the waters are tahar, einom machshirin, it goes together. Shaharei and liritzoin. But if a person shook the water off, now you have to know how to put that together with sheyintek oisim chol koichai, then it's called liritzoin. Okay. If a person stood under a drain pipe, to cool off, or to get cleaned. So you want it to get wet. It's not like I'm walking in the rain. I didn't want to get wet. Here you want to get wet. All the water on you is liratzain. And therefore, if you're tamei, always the mayim sha'alav tamei. Okay, halacha zayin, chavi yishoisim alei peiros. You have a barrel filled with fruit. V'yarat hadelav l'toichai, and water from a drain pipe spilled in it. So what should you do? You should right away pour it out. Wow. Even though that
we're in a rush, but is there a cap of how much time before you found out?
No, I don't know what that is. And here it's even a bigger hit. In other words, you if you didn't desire for the water to enter the barrel, if you didn't desire here, even though you waited, as long as you poured it out, the fruits are not moshe. Halacha 8. You have a kneading trough, and again, water from a drain pipe fell into it. The water that's spritzing off it, it's not called uprooted beratzin. But if, listen to this, guys, that's when the trough is on the ground. What happens if you lift the trough? Not removing the water from the trough, the lifting of the trough. Still, hamayim shebetoicham einam beratzin. Now, I want to make it clear. The moment you pour the water out, that is called telushim l'ratzin. We're speaking about the lifting of the trough. But that's because you didn't want it to get filled with water. But if you place the trough in order for it to receive the water from the drain pipe, so here we say like this. Prior to you picking it up, listen to these details. Hanitatzim b'hatzafim v'shebetoicha are not yet telushim l'ratzin. But the moment you lifted it up, even though you didn't spill it out yet, now, Harei el machshirim, And it's connected with the fact that you placed the water, areva, the trough, purposefully under the drain pipe for it to get filled with water. Halacha 9. Maybe we're lucky that we're late because wow, hamatbil eskelov, when a person is immersing his kelim in a mikvah, or hamachabes es when you're washing your garments, you're doing it in a cave. Hamayim hoilim biyadav, all the water that is in your hands, but are called beratzin because there's no other way. But the water that is coming out of those sources, beraglav, ain't a pollution beratzin. Halacha yud, not you want it, nor it's for sure going to happen. If produce falls into water and you stick your hands and you remove them, but if when you stuck your hands it says, "Ooh, that's good, my hands were dirty," so the water is on your hands, you wanted it to be there. Now you're machshir it. This is gavaldik. Halacha yud aleph. If you place produce in water, you wanted it to get wet. Like we mentioned, even if the act of the placement is beratzin, if the waters are still on the ground, they were not uprooted. But here's the chap: the moment you remove those peiros, because you placed it in there for you wanted the peiros to get wet. Beautiful. In Ketzad, for example, in a radish, a lefis or a turnip, that it is inside a ma'ara, inside a cave. So if the water is still in there, even a nida can rinse it off and leave it in there. But the moment ha'elasu, kol shuhu min hamayim, if any of it was removed from the water, this is beautiful. Nitma b'maga'ah. Final halacha of this chapter, halacha yud beis, kupa shimeleya turmaisin. If you have a container that's filled with turmas beans, these are the beans that have to be cooked 7 times for you to eat them. And this entire kupa was placed in a mikvah. Guys, we keep on learning that waters of the mikvah are still considered connected to the ground. Now, listen to the details. If Moshe Yadai HaTamei, even someone who's Tamei, can stick his hands into the kupa, and can remove some of the beans, and they remain to hide him. Why? Why? You removed it from the kupa. You did not desire for them to get rinsed. However, if you remove the entire basket, the entire container from the water, now we got a problem. See, the container, guys, don't forget, foods you cannot take to the mikvah. The only item of food is water. Now, the container, you want it to go to the mikvah. So, guys, the moment you remove the container from the water on the container was nitlash beratzon. Yachap. So now, if hella min hamayim, then hanoigim bakupa tameim. So then we say something else. The kupa is tart, but the water of the kupa is nitlash beratzon. That water will now touch the beans that are adjacent to the inner part of the container. Those beans become tamei. But all of the other beans inside the container that are not directly touching the container, they remain tohidim. I want to explain something over here. Why do they remain tohidim? The water now was considered nitlash beratzon because you lifted the whole. I'll tell you why. Because, guys, remember, you only go down, let's say, by chulin to a sheni. That's what's going on over here. So the yodayim are going to be matame, let's say, the mayim will become a tchila, shkoyach. So then the beans become a sheni. But a sheni doesn't make a shlishi. Beautiful. To be continued.
Yeah, thank you.
Works. It all works.